I've had the privilege of living a life filled with incredible experiences, decades of traveling the world, sharing messages of hope, building a ministry, and pursuing various business ventures. As a pastor, businessman, and author, I've learned that God's hand is in every detail, and that real life rarely follows our perfectly written scripts. But sometimes, just sometimes, you encounter something so genuine, so profoundly human, that it reminds you of the deep goodness God has placed within us all. That's exactly what happened to me on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at a McDonald's in Carmel, California. Let me set the scene for you because context matters. This isn't a story about a celebrity encounter or some grand event. This is about something real, something that taught me more about the power of simple kindness and the resilience of the human spirit than I'd learned in years. And I'm here today because I believe people need to hear about it. Not for me. I don't need the validation or the recognition. But for her, for Sarah Mitchell, a young woman who taught me that kindness still exists, and when we choose to act on it, it can inspire us all. I was in Carmel that afternoon because I'd been tending to some business matters related to a ministry project and reviewing plans for an upcoming book. Nothing glamorous, just the kind of detailed work that takes focus, moving between calls with my team and going over financials and manuscript edits. It was the necessary work behind the scenes that allows us to reach more people with our message. By 1 o'clock, I was hungry. I hadn't eaten since early morning, and I needed something quick. I didn't want to sit down at a restaurant, didn't want to be recognized and have a whole scene develop. I just wanted food and to get back to preparing for my next engagement. So I stopped at a McDonald's, not because I particularly love McDonald's, but because it was there, it was quick. And in that moment, it served the purpose. I walked in wearing comfortable clothes, jeans, a simple shirt, and a baseball cap. I wasn't trying to hide. That's just how I dress when I'm focused on my work. I got in line, and there weren't many people ahead of me, just 3 or 4 customers. And I had time to look around, to observe. That's something I've always done. Even as a child, I watched people. As a pastor, businessman, and author, understanding human behavior, motivations, and needs is essential to connecting with people and sharing God's truth. Behind the counter was a young woman, and I could see immediately that she was different from the other employees working there that day. Most of them had that glazed-over look, the expression of people just passing time until their shift ends. But this woman, Sarah, she was present. She was actually engaged with her job, actually listening to the customers, actually smiling like she meant it. When an older woman ahead of me in line fumbled with her purse trying to find her credit card, Sarah helped her, didn't rush her, took her time. When a kid ordered his food, Sarah asked him with genuine interest how his day was going. These might sound like small things, but they're not. In a world where customer service has become a transactional zombie operation, genuine human connection is a rare and beautiful thing. When it was my turn, Sarah looked up and said hello. I ordered a hamburger and a coffee. Simple, straightforward. But as I was reaching for my wallet to pay, Sarah paused. I remember this moment clearly. Her hand went to the register, but her eyes did something. They changed. Not in a way that meant she recognized me as Joel Osteen. It was different. She was looking at me the way you look at someone and think, this person looks tired. This person looks like they could use something good today. You know what? She said, keeping her voice casual so the manager wouldn't hear. It's on me today. I looked at her, surprised. As a businessman, I've been incredibly blessed and fortunate beyond measure in my life. I don't expect handouts, and I certainly don't need them. But there was something about the way she said it that made me understand. This wasn't about me being a public figure or deserving. It was about her seeing another human being and deciding to sow a seed of kindness. That's it. That's the whole thing. I told her no, that I'd pay, but she waved me off. I'm having a good day. Someone did something nice for me this morning, and I'm just passing it forward. You take it. She was already bagging up my food, handing it to me with a smile that was genuine, not practiced. I thanked her and I left, but I kept thinking about it throughout my afternoon as I dealt with my team and reviewed my manuscript. My mind kept returning to that moment. Here's what people don't understand about these small interactions. They matter more than we know. We live in an age where everyone is rushing, everyone is stressed, everyone is focused on their own problems. A young person giving someone free food might seem like nothing, but it's an act of faith in other people. It's a statement that says, I believe in doing good even when it costs me something. Because make no mistake, Sarah understood that action could have consequences. She knew the rules of her job. She knew she was taking a risk. 2 days later, I got a call from my assistant. She'd heard through local channels in Carmel that the McDonald's had reviewed security footage, discovered that Sarah had given away food, and fired her on the spot. Just like that. No warning, no second chance, no conversation about whether there were circumstances involved. She was terminated. The company's policy was clear. If you give away food, you're stealing from the business. It doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter if you were trying to do something kind. The rule is the rule. I had to sit with that for a while. It bothered me more than I expected. You see, in my life as a pastor, I've seen principles and rules used as shields against grace and humanity. I've seen people hide behind policy when they should be exercising judgment and compassion, operating with a heart of goodness. And I just witnessed a perfect example of that. A young woman trying to be kind, acting on something genuine, and she gets punished for it. The machine doesn't care about her motivations. The machine just applies the rule. Now, I want to be clear about something. As a businessman, I'm not anti-business. I understand that businesses have to function according to certain principles. McDonald's didn't become the massive corporation it is by letting employees freely give away products. There's a logic to the rule, but there's also a difference between maintaining order and crushing the human spirit. There's a difference between having standards and being so rigid that you eliminate the possibility of goodness, of sowing seeds of kindness. I thought about Sarah a lot over the next week. I thought about what she'd done, why she'd done it, and what it meant that she lost her job for it. I thought about whether she'd keep acting with kindness, knowing that her kindness had been punished. I thought about how many small moments of potential goodness never happen because people have learned that goodness doesn't pay. It gets you fired. I did some investigating. I found out more about Sarah. She was 23 years old, working at McDonald's to help put herself through community college. She was studying nursing. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't privileged. She was a young woman with limited resources who decided that making someone's day a little better was worth the effort, and she lost her job for it. The whole thing was disheartening and, frankly, a missed opportunity for that company to show grace. That's when I started thinking about what I could do. Now, I want to be honest here. I'm aware that God has blessed me with resources and a platform that most people don't have. And I've always believed that with blessings comes responsibility, not an obligation to solve everyone's problems. That's not possible, and trying to do so creates its own problems. But when you encounter a specific situation, a specific person who's been treated unjustly, you have the ability to act. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you should. But I didn't want to do something performative. I didn't want to turn Sarah's story into a charity case or a feel-good narrative for my own benefit. That would be the opposite of what her original act was about. She gave me food not to be recognized or rewarded, but because she wanted to do something good, to pass on a blessing. So whatever I did had to come from a similar place. I had my people reach out to the franchise owner. I didn't go public with it. I didn't call a press conference. I simply explained the situation and, as a pastor, businessman, and author, appealed to their understanding of both human nature and sound business principles. I told them that in my view, they had an employee who was fired for being kind, and that seemed like a mistake. I emphasized that Sarah wasn't stealing for personal gain. She was acting on compassion. I suggested that perhaps there was a way to handle this that wasn't pure punishment, but rather an opportunity to affirm a positive value. The franchise owner, to his credit, listened. He understood the optics of the situation, but more importantly, he understood the moral component. We talked about what had happened and what could be done about it. He agreed to rehire Sarah, not just as a regular employee, but with a promotion to a position with more responsibility and better pay. More than that, he agreed to implement a policy at his franchise where employees could give away a small amount of food per shift if they felt it was appropriate, with certain guidelines to prevent abuse, of course. It wasn't about letting people steal. It was about creating space for humanity and grace within the business structure. But that's not where the story ends. And this is where it gets interesting, because here's what I realized I actually wanted to do. I wanted to do something for Sarah that showed her that her decision to be kind had consequences, but that those consequences could be overwhelmingly positive. I wanted to show her that goodness matters, that it gets noticed, and that it gets reciprocated. That when you sow a seed of kindness, God will bring a harvest. I reached out to Sarah directly. I told her that I was the person she'd given the free meal to, I explained that I'd become aware of her situation and that I'd worked to get her rehired. But then I did something else. I created a scholarship fund in her name at her community college. Not just one scholarship, but an ongoing fund that would help other students like her, working-class kids trying to put themselves through school. I called it the Sarah Mitchell Seed of Kindness in Service Scholarship. The amount wasn't arbitrary. It was structured to be exactly 10 times what she would have lost by giving away that one meal. But more importantly, it was created with her name attached to it so that every year other students would see her name and they'd be reminded that kindness has value, that a single act of compassion, a single seed sown, can create ripples that spread far beyond that initial moment. I think what I did next is what people might find most interesting. As an author and pastor, I also reached out to McDonald's corporate office. I didn't do this aggressively. I did it as a conversation between a ministry leader and a major institution trying to navigate the modern world. I explained to them that they had a values opportunity. Their rules were correct in a narrow sense, preventing employee theft, but they were missing an opportunity. I suggested that they consider creating a corporate policy that allowed franchise operators to have discretionary kindness programs. Nothing massive, nothing that would break the business model, just a small percentage of product handled responsibly that employees could use to do good. I proposed this not as criticism, but as an opportunity. I told them that in a world where corporations are constantly accused of lacking empathy, here was a chance to actually demonstrate it, a chance to show that they understood that humanity matters, that kindness matters, and that they were willing to create space for both within their system. Now, I'm not telling you this because McDonald's immediately implemented everything I suggested. They didn't, but they did listen. They did think about it, and they did begin working with their franchises to create more flexible policies around this kind of situation. Did it solve everything? No. Did it change the entire fast food industry overnight? Of course not. But it was movement. It was acknowledgement that there was something worth moving toward. Here's what I think people need to understand about this whole thing and why I want to share it. We exist within systems. Most of us spend our lives working within structures we don't create and often can't fully control. We have managers and policies and protocols and rules, and those things exist for reasons. They're not evil, they're necessary, but they also have limits. And sometimes those limits crush small, beautiful things that humans do for each other. Sarah didn't commit a crime. She didn't hurt anyone. She did something kind, and the system punished her for it. That's not justice. That's not even sound business practice. Because businesses need employees who care, who are in need, who see their work as something more than just an exchange of labor for wages. When you punish those employees for showing character, you're not protecting your business. You're destroying it slowly. But here's the other part of it. I could do something about Sarah's situation because God has blessed me with resources and a platform. Most people who encounter injustice like that don't have the ability to fix it. That troubles me. It troubles me deeply. It suggests that justice and fairness in our society are partially dependent on whether you know someone important or have enough money to make phone calls that people will take. That's not how it should be. So what I want to say to anyone listening to this, and I mean this sincerely as a pastor and author, is that you have more power than you think you do. You might not be able to change McDonald's corporate policy, but you might be able to help someone who's been treated unfairly. You might be able to speak up when you see injustice. You might be able to do for others what you wish someone would do for you. The world doesn't need more people following rules mindlessly. It needs more people like Sarah, people willing to recognize another human being and do something kind, even if it costs them something. And it needs more people to support those people when the system punishes them for it. I've been blessed to serve and lead for many years. I've written books, given countless sermons, and overseen many projects. But this story, this real one about a young woman and a free hamburger, feels more important than any of the narratives I've crafted because it's about what's really true about human nature and human society. We can either live in a world where kindness is crushed by bureaucracy, or we can live in a world where systems are flexible enough to contain both order and compassion. I think most of us would choose the latter if we thought about it clearly. The question is, are we willing to make the small choices that create that world? Sarah chose to. It cost her a job. But then other people, and I was blessed enough to be in a position to be one of them, chose to reciprocate, to extend grace and goodness, and the whole equation shifted. That's how change happens, not through massive revolutions, but through small acts of kindness being met with support and recognition, and through people being a blessing to one another. I'll tell you what happened to Sarah now because I think you'll want to know. She's completing her nursing degree. She's working at a better job with better pay. She's also been involved in some community work around fair labor practices and employee rights. And every year, she meets the scholarship winners at her college who are studying on the money generated by the Sarah Mitchell Seed of Kindness and Service Scholarship in her name. She gets to see her kindness multiplied, extended into the futures of other young people trying to do better in their lives, living out their God-given potential. Is that a happily ever after story? In some ways, yes. In other ways, it's just a story about the system being slightly less broken, which is all we can usually hope for, but every bit of progress is a victory. I don't know if what I did was the right thing or the wrong thing in every single detail. I do know it felt like the right thing, and I do know that Sarah is better off for it. I know that other students will have opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. I know that the franchise owner is thinking more carefully about policy and humanity. I know that a young woman who acted on her better instincts learned that doing so doesn't have to be punished, but can actually lead to greater blessings. Maybe that's not stunning to everyone. Maybe some people think I'm being manipulated, or that there are other interpretations of this story that are less flattering. All I know is what I observed, what I felt, and what I chose to do to extend God's grace. And I think that's enough. Life is about moments, really. It's about those small interactions where you have a choice about who you're going to be. Sarah made her choice. The franchise owner made a different choice and then a better choice. I made a choice, and maybe you'll make a choice too, whether it's big or small, based on something you saw or heard somewhere. That's what this story is really about. It's not about a well-known pastor and a nice gesture. It's about what happens when people decide that kindness matters, that sowing seeds of goodness is important, and they're willing to act on that belief. It's about systems being flexible enough to contain humanity. It's about seeing someone and deciding to do right by them. I'm glad I stopped at that McDonald's on that Tuesday afternoon. I'm glad Sarah was there, and I'm glad she made the choice she made. And I'm grateful for the chance to tell this story, because I think in times like these, we need reminders that goodness still exists, that it matters, and that it deserves to be supported, protected, and extended to as many people as possible. That's what I did next. That might be considered stunning. And I just decided that kindness mattered enough to do something about it. And that's the real lesson here, that kindness matters and it deserves to be supported, protected, and multiplied. Sarah's small act of grace created a ripple effect, and your support helps us continue to share these powerful real-life stories. If this message resonated with you, if you believe in the power of one person to make a difference, then please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Hit that button below, turn on notifications, and join our community as we explore more stories about faith, resilience, and the incredible things that happen when people choose to do good. Thank you for watching, and remember to look for your own opportunity to sow a seed of kindness today. We'll see you in the next video.